And we are underway. Welcome, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 19th, 2022, and we are talking today on today's episode of the Minnesota Outdoor Skills and Stewardship Series. We are talking Darkhouse Spearing, and we have our special guest, Amanda Quaylen, with us here today to talk about that. She is our spearing expert and guru. Um, I am really stoked about this talk. If anybody's tuned into this before, y'all know I'm a fairly recent addition to Minnesota. I came over in 2017, and as soon as I heard about Darkhouse Spearing, I said to myself, I want some of that. I want me some Darkhouse Spearing because growing up down south, this is such a foreign concept. And I mean, just being able to walk on water in the winter is kind of a foreign concept down there. But we do it here. It's awesome. I've been out. I have to say I'm a healthy convert to spearing, and I'm really excited to talk with Amanda about today's topic, and we're going to get into it. So Amanda, if you could advance the next slide. Really quickly, welcome again, everybody. This is the Outdoor Skills and Stewardship Series for the Minnesota DNR. We are here to talk about Darkhouse Spearing, how you get started, and some tips on what to do next for next steps. This is the WebEx platform. If you have any questions, please direct them to the Q&A. That will be in the bottom right of your screen, the Q&A. It's a lot easier for us to navigate questions if they're in the Q&A. We're going to be posting links and additional information in the chat so that you can get to that right away. All of this is being recorded. It will be posted on our website afterwards. And so you can get to it there. You can refer to your friends to there. So that's what we're doing today. That's how we're working. If you need closed captioning is available underneath the Q&A option under the multimedia viewer. If you just click, you'll get a big blue button that says, do you want to continue? Hit that, and you should be getting live captioning as we go forward. So Amanda, could you advance us to the next slide? This is part of a weekly series for anybody to tune in to learn about new stuff, find out information, and engage one-on-one with the topic, us as DNR staff and our guests who are experts at this stuff and doing it. So far, it's always been at Wednesdays at noon. We're going to be continuing that moving forward. And our goal is really just for you to learn about hunting, fishing, and outdoor recreation opportunities that we have here in Minnesota, because they're tremendous, and we're very fortunate to have what we have. We want to share how we manage the state's wildlands and wildlife, and give you tips on how you can be stewards of our shared natural resources, because they belong to all of us. Some upcoming talks that folks might be interested in. Next week, I'm going to be talking about winter squirrel hunting. So tactics, how to find a spot, what you might think about when you're going out, because it's a little different than that early season, kind of, hey, we'll just take the 22 for a walk in the woods and see what happens. Winter squirrel hunting takes a little bit more thought, a little bit more preparation, and some hardier gear to weather the weather. And so that's coming up next week. February 2nd, we've got snowshoeing and cross-country skiing basics. February 9th, we've got our introduction to winter camping. February 16th, we're going to be talking about maple syruping, because that's right around the corner. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but next year and next fall. So, all right. I am going to turn it over to Amanda. Amanda Quaylen, please take it away. I've known Amanda for a couple of years now. She participated as part of our R3 Citizen Advisory Council from 2018 to 2019. I love talking with Amanda about spearing. And Amanda, please introduce yourself and tell us about Darkhouse Spearing.
Yeah, great. Thanks, James. Hi, everyone. Like James mentioned, my name is Amanda Quaylen. I am a member of the East Central chapter of the Minnesota Darkhouse and Angling Association, also known as MDAA. Like James also mentioned, I was a part of the R3 Council for a few years. Really enjoyed that, really enjoyed working with James. Um, Another interesting thing about me is I actually did not grow up hunting or fishing. I grew up bass fishing in the summers with my grandpa a little bit, but didn't grow up hunting, didn't grow up ice fishing, and definitely didn't grow up spearing. So I started doing all of that as an adult. I started spearing about 10 years ago, and I've it's arguably my favorite outdoor activity of all the hunting and fishing things that I do. So I got really into it. In 2019 and 2020, I hosted two women's spearing weekends. And that gave over 60 women the opportunity to try spearing. And most of them were actually trying it for the first time. So to see these women come out and give it a shot and give it a try for the first time, and a lot of them were successful and speared their first fish, it was really wonderful, really awesome. So my goal for us today is to, kind of give you a spearing 101 talk. I want to give you a taste for what spearing is like, and kind of point you in the right direction if you're interested in getting involved in pursuing spearing, or at least giving it a try. So, why go spearing? There's so many answers to this question, and if you ask different people, 100 different people, you're going to get 100 different answers. Here are a few of my favorite things about spearing. Number one, northern pike's delicious. I really enjoy cooking wild game and fish. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love experimenting. I love trying new recipes. If you don't know, northern pike is a very mild tasting fish. It's a white flesh, white fish, very mild, and it's very versatile. Another really great thing about spearing is you get to spend some quality time with family and friends. That's something that's really important to me. And it's similar to deer hunting. And what I mean when I say that is you're in the spear shack, you're sitting in your chair looking down your hole, just like you're sitting in your deer stand, staring at the woods, waiting for something to happen. And then all of a sudden, when a fish starts to poke into your hole and you can see its head, it's like the biggest adrenaline rush ever. And it's really exciting. It all changes in a second. It all happens really fast. A lot like sitting in your deer stand and that big 12-point buck steps out. Um, and a lot of people ice fish, and I enjoy ice fishing myself. But I think that darkhouse spearing is a really exciting, thrilling alternative to angling. So that's a couple reasons why I enjoy spearing. A little background information on northern pike. So, in my opinion, pike is a great fish to chase for beginners. They're a very aggressive fish. They're very abundant in Minnesota lakes and rivers. Very, very high populations. They're very receptive to bait and lures. You can troll with a minnow, you can throw a spinner, you can throw a crankbait. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And when you finally hook into one, they put up a fantastic fight. They're a very strong fish and they're very fun to catch. Um, and they can get really big. So I looked up the Minnesota state record and was surprised to find out it's 46 and a half inches. That's a really, really good sized fish. So very exciting fish to pursue both in the boat and also in the spear house. This picture here is me last summer. That is my biggest pike I've ever caught. Put up a fantastic fight. I believe she was 35 inches. Caught and released her last summer. All right. So don't be startled by this long list. I know it looks like a lot initially, but we're going to talk a little bit about the equipment you need to go spearing. And a lot of the equipment overlaps with what you need to go ice fishing. So a lot of people ice fish. If you've got that gear, you're definitely set up to, you'll need a couple additional things to go spearing, but you're definitely off to a great start. So let's just kind of run down the list here. Waterproof clothing and layers. Layers are really important. When you're setting up, you're going to want waterproof clothing because you can get wet sometimes when you're drilling the hole. And let's see, ice picks for safety, boot chains as well. It can get a little slippery when you're setting up at times when there's not a lot of snow. A sled for all your gear, auger, shovel, chisel, heater and propane, an ice scoop to clean out the hole, chairs and buckets to sit on, whatever you've got is fine, ice fishing rods, heavy braided line, and a measuring stick to check the ice with. So that's all stuff that if you ice fish or if your friends ice fish, those are things that they're typically going to have, which is great. So one thing that James and I were talking about last week was, this list may seem a little daunting, but if you can, meet up with your friends and they've got all this ice fishing gear, then maybe you, if you're interested in, trying spearing, you fill in the gaps a little bit. Maybe you buy a spear, maybe you buy an ice saw, maybe you buy a couple of decoys, things like that. Some nice to haves here. Actually, let me back up for a second. I forgot to mention in this, I've got a couple pictures here. The little minnow you see on the left-hand side, that's a spearing sucker that we use. We put a little pin through its back and put it down the hole with that heavy-duty fishing line. You can also see our spear, and we speared a little northern there. And then on the right, that's a picture of one of our dark houses that we use. You can see the spear, and that's my brother-in-law sitting on a bucket with a nice cup of coffee in the morning, just enjoying the dark house. All right, so some nice to haves. We cut our holes with a chainsaw with 3-foot blade. Not necessary. You don't have to have it. It's just, it makes things a little easier. So that's a picture of me cutting the spear hole with a chainsaw. You can see that there's an auger hole in the middle of that square I'm cutting, and that's because we drilled an auger hole and you lay on the ice, and you put your hands over like this, and you kind of look down there and check for the right scenery. Typically, and we'll get into more detail about this later, but you like to be set up on a weed edge or weed line and have good clear water. And then we've got some decoys there in the picture. Those are some wooden decoys. Let's see, what else? ATV is nice to have. It just makes it a little easier hauling your gear out if there's thick enough ice for that. GPS is nice to have as well. It helps with picking spots. Again, not necessary, but nice to have. A magnet is also a nice thing to have because, things occasionally do fall in the spear hole. I have lost sunglasses, I've lost my cell phone, and, sometimes, those things happen. So it's nice to have a magnet so you don't have to go for a swim in the middle of winter and try to, get your gear. Snacks and beverages are great. Speaker for music. The fish can't hear if you're playing music or if you're talking. So it's, it's a pretty casual environment. Those things are welcomed. And a float suit is also nice to have for safety. All right, so here's a couple pictures. I just wanted to show a couple of different setups. On the left-hand side, that is a permanent dark house shelter. And you can see we've got some rattle reels set up on the side of the house. And those are connected to decoys that go down in the hole. And then you can see the buddy heater as well. On the right-hand side, this is my husband and his dad and brother. They've got a spear there. You can see that pop-up house and a shovel. And then on the left, you see the scoop. That's handmade. We connected that to a metal pole, a big mesh scoop, to help with clearing out the hole after we cut it. Let's see here. This is me drilling and checking holes with the auger there. And then on the right-hand side, we've got some ice tongs, and I am pulling the big block out of the hole as we're setting up. Okay. So spearing tips. These are just some things that will set you up for success. Again, if you ask other spear fishermen, what their top tips are, everybody's going to have some different answers. And, much like hunting or ice fishing, there's tons of different strategies on how to go about it. So here's what we typically do, and these are some tips that, will set you up for success. Using a GPS, that's helpful. It helps to identify the depths. Typically, we like to spear in 8 to 15 feet. 15 is pretty deep. So typically 8 to 12 is that sweet spot. Like I mentioned, we like to drill test holes and physically lay down on the ice and look down them. Sometimes we'll even take a decoy and put that down the hole and swim it a little bit and see what that looks like. And we also measure, how deep the water is. Typically, we like to set up on a weed line. Like I mentioned, 8 to 12, 8 to 15 feet. Cabbage is king, and what I mean when I say that is northern pike really like cabbage. It's not a big chunky weed that's kind of murky and gross. It's a very clean weed. So we like to set up by that as opposed to like coontail. If you're familiar with that, it's kind of a thick, mucky weed. And some of that's okay. But you don't want a ton of it and you don't want the weeds to come all the way up to the surface of the water. Not only is it bad for visibility, but if you throw the spear, that tends to mucky up your hole sometimes. A sand bottom has better visibility than like a muddy bottom. Think about the backdrop. It's just kind of a clearer, lighter picture. We like to use 2 decoys in our hole, 1 live, so that sucker minnow that I showed you with the pin in its back on the previous slide, and then 1 wooden decoy. And I like to switch the decoy up. I get a little antsy sometimes. I like to switch the decoy up every 15 minutes or so. But again, if you ask somebody else, they might say a completely different number, and that's okay. Put the decoys at a depth that you're comfortable with. The fish will come up to your decoy. So if you're new and you're set up in 12 feet of water, it is okay to have the decoys, 4 feet down. If that's what you're comfortable with, the fish will come up. You don't need to worry about, they're just going to go right by. They're not even going to see my bait. They'll come to your bait. Let's see. And then we also, another thing I would recommend is using the MN Lake Finder. I've included that link here. And I believe James will also put that in the chat. And one of the great things about that is we've got a lot of, I think, over 4,000 Minnesota lakes. We've got data for them there. And you can check on the water clarity, which is really important for spearing. You want to spear on a fairly clear lake if you can. It's just easier to see in general. And you can also look at the netting. So you can see, if a lake has a lot of pike, you might want to check it out. All right, where to spear. So these are a couple things that I look for when I'm going to set up. This is a bay in Lake Minnetonka. I've never fished it. Number one, when picking a spot, I would say go to the Lake Finder on the DNR website and check water clarity and see what the pike numbers look like before picking a spot. So let's say, this bay is pretty clear and the pike numbers are good. I have no idea. Again, I've never speared this bay. But a couple things to look for. Underwater points are really good. And like I said, that sweet spot for us is 8 to 12, 8 to 15 feet. So as you can see, let me see if I can get my laser pointer to work here. Right here, James, can you see that? Yeah, okay. So up here, we've got an underwater point. That's something that, fish like to travel along the weed line. Any change in structure is going to be good there. Another underwater point here, 10, 12, 15 feet. Another thing to look for would be underwater humps. So like right here, that's a little deep, but again, that could work. And then inside turns are also a good place to set up and look. And then we've got one more point here. One thing that was attractive to me about this spot is it looks like it's got a little bit more of a steep drop off. Okay. And then if I zoom in on this, so do you see this little crappie hole? It'd be a good place. It's pretty deep. I looked at this online, and this little hole right here that says shallow area is about 30 feet. So it could be a good place to set up for crappies, but it also, might be a good place to set up on the edge there for pike. So those are a couple of things that we like to look for. All right, so this is one of my favorites. Like I said earlier, a couple of northern pike recipes that I like to make, a couple of my favorites. And I broke this out into two different categories. One for little pike under 22 inches. All of these recipes that I've mentioned here, you don't need to mess with the Y bones. Those, I mean, it can be a pain in the butt sometimes for smaller fish. So I like to leave those in typically. Um, in the top middle there, those are some hammer handle tail bites. The tail section of every northern pike is boneless, so you can cut that little piece out. And I like to coat it in panko and egg and fry that with some olive oil in a pan and some seasonings. Another thing you can do is you can fillet the pike. Don't worry about the Y bones, and you can actually put it in a grinder and make pike cakes like you would, like a crab cake or something. You can see on the top right, that's what I had made there and served it with some homemade tartar sauce. It was really good. And I know that sounds kind of weird leaving the bones in there, but the grinder will really, grind them up and you won't even notice them, I promise. And then another thing that you can do is you can pickle your pike. There's a lot of different recipes out there. For us, it was a lot of trial and error to find the right one that we liked the best. But that's also a really nice way to do it. The bones will disintegrate with the vinegar over time, and you don't have to worry about the bones that way. For bigger pike, it takes a lot of practice to learn how to remove the Y bones, but you'll get there. It's a lot of like muscle memory. So some things I like to do with larger pike is make pike tacos, which is something that if you told me I had to eat one food for the rest of my life, I would definitely pick pike tacos. So it's really delicious. You can add whatever toppings you want, whatever seasonings, just like some good old taco seasoning in a pan, cut it up. It's super easy. Blackened pike fillets, or you could do a traditional fish fry, which you can do that a bunch of different ways as well. All right. So if any of this has intrigued you, you're probably wondering what's next. So I've got a couple recommendations for you on how to get started. The easiest way that I think you could try spearing and not have to invest in all of the equipment is you could rent a Darkhouse from a guide service. Um, you know, not all ice fishing guides have spearing equipment, but some of them do have spear houses. Like I know Garrison Sports does have some Darkhouse equipment that you can rent, and they'll set up houses for you. So you can Google, spearing guide services, and some things will pop up. Another thing I would say is join the Fear the Spear Darkhouse Spearing group on Facebook. I included a little snip here of what the group looks like when you search it on Facebook. This community is so wonderful. There's about, I think, close to 12,000 members now. And I've seen with my own eyes, people will post in there, they're brand new to spearing, they've never gone before, and someone will say, hey, like, can you point me in the right direction? And people will offer to take them out and just be like, hey, let me show you the ropes. It's also, this talk has been a really high level overview of spearing. There's a lot of really good information and a lot of really experienced people in this group, and they're more than willing to help newbies. I myself have posted a lot of questions in there, and everybody's always very willing to help. So fantastic group to join. That would be my top takeaway here is if you're interested, go join that group and learn more. Another thing you could do is you could join your local MDAA chapter. They do put on events and they've got chapter meetings every month and they do annual banquets. It's like a Pheasants Forever chapter, but for spearing. So that's a good way to get in and meet people that go spearing and have, experience and kind of network. And, it's a great way to get out and meet people. Another thing, you can always be on the lookout for DNR clinics and events. There's nothing coming up this winter, but I'm sure, once COVID settles down a little bit, we'll have some things in the hopper for next year. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about spearing regulations and licenses. So you need two things if you want to go spearing. You need an angling license and you need a spearing license. spearing license is only, I think, $6 or $7, so pretty inexpensive. And if you set up your house and you leave it overnight, you will need a shelter permit. A couple regulations, and this isn't a full list of the regulations. If you want to see that, go check out the hunting and fishing rigs on the DNR website. So season starts November 15th and it goes through the last Sunday in February. You can spear from sunrise to sunset, and honestly, you can't see any later than sunset anyway. It gets pretty dark in the hole once the sun sets. So you can spear pike. That's what we predominantly go for, but you can also spear rough fish and whitefish and catfish as well. You can also take a fish by angling. You can drop a jig down in your hole if you're in a spot where, I mean, if it's good for pike and walleyes. Your spear does count as a line, but you can drop a jig down, or you could set up a tip up if you wanted to. Like I said, your spear counts as a line, and you cannot use, I get this question all the time from beginners. They ask if you can, drop lights down in your hole to attract fish, and the answer is no. You cannot use lights to attract fish. You can't drop any sort of light down there. Another thing to note is please mark your holes and put ice blocks back in the holes when you are done. If you leave your blocks out on the ice, and a snowmobile runs into it, it's not great. They're gonna have a bad time, so you don't want to do that. And it's just the courteous thing to do is to mark your hole and put your blocks back in. All right, northern pike zones. So our state of Minnesota is broken up into 3 different zones. So the northeast zone, as you can see here in this picture, pike are present in low numbers, but the average size of the pike is relatively high in this area. And then in the north central zone, which is the biggest region of the state, this area is plagued by a lot of small pike, which causes all sorts of problems for the ecosystems. They eat all the bait fish. They end up eating each other sometimes too. They are cannibalistic. So there's too many small pike there. And then in the southern zone, we've got a lot of fast growing fish, but the pike are less abundant. So with these 3 different zones, we've got some different regulations for each. And just really quickly, I'll go over those. So in the northeast, you can take 2 pike, all from 30 to 40 inches require release, and you can only take 1 pike over 40 inches. In the north central zone, you can have 10 pike, but not more than 2 longer than 26 inches. And one caveat to spearing is you can have 1 pike between 22 and 26 inches. When you're angling, all those fish in the north central zone need to be released. And then in the southern zone, 2 pike with a minimum size of 24 inches. So you may be thinking, how do I tell how big a pike is in a spear hole? And a lot of that comes with experience. But one thing I would say to that is know how big your decoys are. So physically measure your spearing sucker or your wooden decoy, know how long they are. So our decoy is typically about, I would say, 8 inches or so. So when that's down in the hole, I would take a look at that side by side with the pike that you're looking at. And if the decoy looks to be, or if the fish looks to be more than 3 lengths of the decoy, then you can probably take that fish. But when in doubt, just don't spear it. There will be other fish. So if you're not sure if it's big enough, in the southern zone, for example, it needs to be 24 inches or larger, just don't spear it. It's okay. Okay, I just want to touch on this really quickly. There's a lot of lakes in Minnesota that don't have muskies. So if this makes you hesitant in any way, you can go spear on a lake without muskies, but just something to be aware of when you're going spearing and if you're on a lake where there are muskies. So a couple quick things there. Northern pike are always going to look darker in the hole, and they're always going to have light markings. And their tail is typically rounded. Muskie are light and silver in the hole, and they've got pointed fins pointed tips on their tail. And they kind of they glow differently in the hole. They kind of light up the hole. I don't know how to explain it, but they're always lighter and they'll have the darker markings. And then a tiger muskie is a sterile hybrid of a pike and a muskie, and they also always have a lighter body with darker markings. Oh, and a side note, it is illegal to spear muskies in Minnesota, so just something to be aware of. Again, if you're hesitant about this, just go spear on a lake that doesn't have muskies. Okay. Now we're going to play a little game. I want you guys to guess, and you can type in the chat what you think it is. So here's the first picture here. Do we think this is a northern pike or a muskie? I'll give you guys a second. Seeing a bunch of.
And I will come in and look at some of these. Let me see. We got. This is fun. Pike, northern, muskie. We got a couple of muskies. It looks like the consensus is pike.
All right. Drum roll, please. This is a northern pike. And the reason you can tell that it is a northern pike is you see this back right here is very dark. And you've got some light colored markings here. So that's the giveaway on this photo. Just remember, dark background, light colored markings. And they're always going to be dots if it's a pike. All right, next picture. What do we think this one is?
Let's see it. Pike, northern, pike. Tiger muskie. That's specific.
Ooh.
Pike. Anybody else? Looks like the consensus is pike.
All right. This is a northern pike. You guys are right. Again, and you can tell this is a really clear picture. And you can tell this guy is spearing in very shallow water, but you can see the dark colored back with the light markings. So that's the dead giveaway there.
I think the fin color is probably what somebody clued in on the tiger muskets, because when you look at it next to that other northern, they look lighter, and I think that's an important lesson in the difference in the substrate of where you're spearing, right? Because those fins are so thin at the tips, you're actually seeing the lightness of the bottom of the lake versus in that first picture where you can't see the bottom of the lake, and so those fins look dark.
Yeah, that's a really good point, James. All right. Next one. What do we think?
All right.
Muskie.
All right, muskie. We got some definitive ones. There were some exclamation points in that one. Muskie.
Somebody's
I think
really
yeah, somebody was confident about that one. It looks like the consensus is muskie.
very nice. All right, so you can see here, again, you know, it kind of varies with background to background, but this fish is really light in that hole. And you can see the kind of the barred markings with, you know, the light background and the markings are dark. So that's the dead giveaway there. One more. What do we think?
Got a muskie. Muskie. There's one pike. There's one vote for pike.
Okay.
I got a random lake trout. Muskie. It looks like the consensus is muskie.
Cool. You guys are right. Nice job. Oh, wait, where's my little answer here? Technical difficulties. There we go. Muskie. Yep, that is right. Couple things about this photo. As you can see, this fish just glows differently. It's very light. It kind of, you know, it lights up the hole like I was kind of mentioning before. Let me see if I can also zoom in here. The nose, you can see the little point on the nose. That's also a dead giveaway. So lighter in color, and the nose is a little bit pointed differently than a pike would be. All right. All right, couple more things for you guys, and then we can get over to the Q&A. Something that's really important that we always need to remember, whether we're ice fishing, snowmobiling, or spearing, anything on the ice, is safety. Some general rules, and I took this directly from the DNR's website. So for clear new ice only, anything less than 4, you're going to want to stay off. At 4 inches, you can start walking on the ice and you can angle. Or spear. You can set up a little hub house if you want. 5 to 7, you can put a snowmobile or ATV on there. 8 to 12 is a car or small pickup. And then 12 to 15 inches is a medium truck. So in general, when you're traveling on white ice is weaker than clear, dark ice. You're going to want to double the above depths of the ice. A couple things, always carry some ice picks and wear a float suit if you can. So if something does go wrong, you know, you're floating and you can kind of pull yourself out there. Your safety is your responsibility. FYI, just so you know, the DNR does not measure ice. So it is your responsibility to go and measure ice and evaluate whether it is safe for activities or not. And then feel free, if you ever have any questions or concerns, you can always connect with me. I've included my Instagram and Facebook pages, and you can also shoot me an email. I love helping beginners, so if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to connect.
Fantastic. And I'm going to put a link from Amanda's Instagram page in the chat. This is her spearing a northern. Just a heads up, I open the link, but it's got some music to it. So if you want to hear the Q&A that's following, I would wait until we're done. But here it is, and you can see Amanda in action. So Amanda, thank you so much. That was some really great information.
Yeah.
I've been putting some stuff in the chat. I re-put in some of the links because we had somebody that lost a connection and lost some of those, and then we had one of our guests, Jeff, sent us a nice link to a water quality remote sensing page by the University of Minnesota. So Amanda was talking about how important water quality is with this stuff, and so that might be another resource for folks. And Jeff, I appreciate you making that known to us. That's one of the great things about these webinars is not only do you get to ask us direct questions, but you get to share your information, and we get to learn some stuff too, because I had no idea that website existed.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. I didn't know about it either.
Nice. Okay, so getting into the Q&A. So we've got a question. I'm relatively new to spearing. When spearing, I use a decoy that does not have a hook. I set up a tip up outside of the Darkhouse. And then I can't see the rest of the question.
As I set a tip up outside the Darkhouse.
If I see a walleye through the hole, can I set down the spear, grab a rod, and jig for the walleye? I know that you cannot spear walleye.
So unfortunately, your spear counts as a line, and James, correct me if I'm wrong. Whether it's in the water or not, if you have a spear with you, it counts as a line. So if you have a tip up set up and you've got a spear, unfortunately, you can't add a third and drop a jig down if you're by yourself.
That's my understanding as well. I know plenty of guys, and I do it as well. If I'm spearing, I will have a rod with me, and if I see a bunch of panfish come through, I'll drop a line, one with my spear. But that's it. So if you've got a tip up set up outside and you're spearing, that you're done. You're capped. So that's that. Okay. Do you use regular bar oil for your chainsaw? And that's a question from Mark.
We do not use oil in our chainsaw. That's a great question. I should have mentioned that earlier. Originally, we used to use vegetable oil, but then over time we found that water actually lubricates everything just fine. So we don't use any oil in our chainsaw.
Nice. Kind of a counterintuitive place to be when with chainsaws.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
On social
Oh, and
media,
sorry, I need to mention one more thing about the chainsaw. Sorry.
go ahead.
We have a chainsaw that's just dedicated to spearing. We only use that to cut ice. We don't cut wood or anything else with it. It's just a spearing chainsaw, and that's why, we can get away with not putting any oil in it.
Nice. On social media, I hear people talking about putting items such as eggshells, sliced potatoes, or corn on the bottom to improve visibility. Wouldn't this be considered littering or generally not allowed?
I believe that is illegal. I don't think you can put anything down your hole, no eggshells or anything.
No. I would avoid it. I don't think you need it. Given um, if you're in a place where you need to put something in the bottom of the spear hole to improve visibility, I would recommend you finding a new spot. It I think there's plenty of places to go and find places where it's easier to see and make those calls.
Yeah, I agree. There's plenty of wonderful clear lakes in our great state. That's what's so wonderful about our great state is there's, 10,000 plus lakes and a lot of them have really high water quality.
Okay, and then let me see, what should you do if you accidentally spear a muskie?
I'll let you take that one, James.
Um, you know, it- Mistakes happen, and people recognize that. Um, my personal recommendation, I would self-report. I would call in the tip line and let folks know and let the warden know. Um, like I said at the beginning, I'm new in this spearing journey. Like I'm all in, but I'm still very new. I am very nervous about muskies. I get really, you know, until my identification skills get a little better when you're in the hole. I avoid lakes that have muskies on them. I will intentionally not go on lakes that have muskies on them because I'm nervous about it, and it's something that I think about a lot. But um, the the um, the good thing to do would be to call the tips line, self-report, explain your situation, and most conservation officers, if you're honest and upfront with them, they're reasonable folks, and it's when you try to pull something over on them or you're not fully honest, that's when things can get a little dicey. So our COs are great, wonderful folks. They want you out there. They want you enjoying yourself and having a good time and being safe. But yeah, you should call that in and report it and explain what happened because I think we all know that mistakes happen and sometimes like we saw in Amanda's pictures, sometimes it's not always easy to tell what's what. So
Yeah. And one thing I would add to that is don't let this deter you from trying spearing. Don't be afraid of spearing because, you're like, oh gosh, I might spear muskie. Just go to a lake that does not have muskies if you're new. That's what I would say.
and that kind of ties into the slot limit question as well, right? That's also something that I'm nervous about. I'm still not the best judge of pike length in the hole. So I'm in St. Paul. I could go in either that southern zone or the north central zone. I pretty much exclusively spear in the north central zone because it gives me a little bit more flexibility if I misjudge the size of one. You get one oops fish in the north central zone within that slot that doesn't that you can spear and be like, oh, looks like it was 23 inches instead of under 22.
Hmm.
So you can pick hopefully you can pick your spots a little better and make it so that it's not quite so intimidating or quite so high stakes, especially when you're starting out.
Yep, I agree. That's a really good answer. Another thing I would say for beginners is the north central zone is great because typically the pike are present in their higher abundance. And there's typically a lot of smaller fish, but you're going to get a lot of action. So for beginners, I would say that's something that I would try to do is go look at the netting, see which ones have a high abundance of pike. Typically they're smaller, that's okay. And you're gonna get more action and more experience with identifying the fish and kind of judging how big they are. I would say that when fish are down, I mean, they do look a little bigger down in the water. So using your decoy and knowing how long your decoy is, using that as a point of judgment is going to be really important.
And with both the muskie identification and the length identification, with both of those, it's a lot like everything else. If you're in doubt or you're not totally sure, just don't throw it. Don't throw the spear. Enjoy the show. Enjoy watching them come in. Be conservative um, uh, with what you're doing and treat it. I mean, it's just like it's it's a lot like hunting, right? Like you can't catch and release with spearing. So you've got to be solid. You've got to be sure about what you're doing. So if you're unsure, if it's borderline, if you're not quite sure on the ID, just let it go. And another one's going to come along, and you then get to talk about how great it was to see these things come in and then swim out, because that's also a big part of the fun. We've
Yeah.
got we've got a lot of questions, so
Oh, okay. We'll keep going then.
let me see. Can you show how you pin a live sucker minnow? Um, there's a lot online that you can do that, but Amanda
Yeah.
has a quick decoy that she could demonstrate with.
So, I've got this decoy, won it at a Pheasants Forever banquet, my favorite. So a minnow will have a fin up here like this, and typically you want to pin it like right in this area, right in front of that fin. It will vary slightly depending on how big your minnow is. But it's a lot of trial and error practice. I can't even tell you how many minnows I've pinned, and I do it too far up, and then they sit like this in the hole, and I'm angry for the whole time that I use that minnow. But it's okay. You'll learn. So in general, just in front of this fin here on the minnow,
Nice.
and don't
What
pin it
kind of
too deep. You don't want it to bleed, and.
yeah? What kind of ice tongs can you use to get those blocks safely out and back into the water?
They make ice tongs specifically for spearing. You can find those online with a little Googling. And you can also post and fear the spear. I know some people sell them in there.
They typically have longer handles, so it's not like your normal ice block tongs. They
Mhm.
typically, they stand up there 2.5, 3 feet long sometimes. The ice that you can be spearing on, that can be over 2 feet thick sometimes. So having tongs that have a pretty wide grip is important. Personally, I don't use ice tongs. When I go out, I will actually push the ice blocks under the ice with a spud bar with a big piece of metal. Not all the way. I will leave a little bit sticking out, and I I will rest my spear on that little shelf as I'm waiting for fish to come in, and then that way my spear never comes out of the water. You don't have to worry about splashing onto the surface. The tips are always in the water. Um, and then when I'm done, I'll use that same spud bar and I'll push the corner down and I'll pull that ice block back out and it just pops right back into place. And it seems to be less effort than hefting 2 foot thick blocks of ice out of the water.
Yeah, when it gets that thick towards the end of the year, we cut the hole and then we'll cut the block into a couple different blocks to make it a little more manageable to pull out. Because it is a pretty good workout when you get the that thick ice. So.
Yep. Yep. It looks like some of your decoys have hooks on them. Do you catch the pike on the hook first and then spear them, or do you spear the fish without its mouth being hooked onto anything? Joel, go ahead, Amanda.
So spearing decoys do not have any hooks on them. As you can see on this, and I don't know if you have any decoys in your office, James, that you can show just a little bit different.
Yep.
Um, this is where we attach the fishing line with a clip, and it hangs down, but there are no hooks anywhere on spearing decoys. And there's no
Yeah.
hooks
So
on the sucker minnows either, just a pin or a harness.
yep. So this is one on my jigging stick. This is called a jigging stick, and you can see this is tip up line, and then it just goes to a white braid, and I've got my decoy sitting on it, and it's got a little handle, and I'll sit here and I'll just move this up and down to get it to motion. Usually, I use live harnesses This is a clip-on rattle reel. So I have a pop-up house, and I'll just like clip this onto one of the bars on the top of the house, and I'll attach this harness to a sucker minnow. And the reason why I like, you can hear it rattles because there's bells inside of it. The reason I like a rattle reel on my live minnow is that that live sucker minnow can act as an early warning system. That because the sucker minnow is going to see the pike coming before you do. And so if it starts moving and it'll actually turn that rattle reel, that gives me an audio cue that something might be coming.
Yeah. One thing I would add to that is sometimes your minnow will just move for the sake of moving. It's on a pin and it doesn't like it. So one thing that I found is when my sucker minnow is sitting in the hole like this, and if it does a complete 180 and starts swimming away aggressively, that is a pretty good indication that you want to get ready. But it will swim around when fish are in the area, but sometimes they just randomly swim too.
Yep. Very good question for new folks. When spearing, do you drop the spear or throw it?
That is a great question. I should have covered that already. So when you're spearing, I'll just go over as best I can without visuals here how to throw the spear. Number one, what you want to do is you see a fish coming in, don't panic. You have time, but you don't always have a ton of time. So what you want to do, and I grab it on the side, on the handle, like this, and I put my tines completely in the water. And I even go a little farther because we tend to spear a little deeper. And you want to give that, you don't want to like chuck it and you don't want to just like drop it. You want to give it a nice good push. So I mean that'll come with experience too. But you by no means do you need to like chuck it. You just want to give it a good push. Does that make sense?
And I've honestly, I if even if you just let it go, you're going to be pretty good with it. So yeah, don't try. It's not, this isn't Game of Thrones. You're not trying to harpoon Moby Dick. Just kind of get the spear over the fish and let it go, and
Yeah.
you should be okay.
And in
Uh,
fact, that video that James put in the chat, that Instagram video, that's a video of one of my friends spearing their first pike. You can see how hard they throw that, and it gives a good frame of reference. So check that out after the call.
yep. Which decoy color has yielded the most success for you?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, what I would say is it depends on the lake, but I typically spear on a lake that's plagued by a lot of those tiny northerns. And there's not a lot of perch or sunfish or bait fish. It's a lot of small northerns. So I've got a like 10-inch long baby northern decoy that I actually painted. It kind of has like a fire tiger look to it, but it's a baby northern. It's got a green back and an orange belly. That one's killer on the lake that we spear on typically. So
Nice. And for me, I know a lot of the classic patterns with spearing decoys have a lot of red and white on them.
yeah, those are
Um,
always good.
those are usually good. And I mean this red and white decoy, I've literally had pike come up and just bite down on it. Even though I've never in my life seen a fish that looks like this. So, um, it, color. A lot of the decoys are better at attracting anglers than they are attracting pike. So it really comes down to being really subjective.
Yeah. And
Mark's got
Piker, go ahead.
no. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like I mentioned earlier, pike are really aggressive and they're super receptive to bait and lures. So honestly, I wouldn't overthink the color thing. We can sit here and say, oh, this works for me, that works for me. But really, as long as you've got a decoy in the water, I've seen an old, battered up, like decoy with the paint's literally falling off, and fish love it. So,
And and it seems lately a lot of people are talking about just having spinning golf balls down at the bottom of
yeah.
the hole.
Yep, I've used those before. Those work too.
So if you don't have a lure, you could you if you got a golf ball around, you could still use that.
Yeah.
Um, Amanda, do you think more fish come into live or artificial decoys?
I would say, in my experience, they come in more often. to the live decoy, but it's closer than you would think. I mean, they come into the wood decoy. I mean, maybe I'd say 60% of the time they're coming after the live one, and then 40% they're going at the wood. So
Nice.
both work.
Some more questions about lengths. Can you put items such as measured length of PVC down in the hole to help gauge length of the fish as long as you can retrieve it? I've heard of people doing that. I've heard of people putting down, like literally, you've got the vinyl fish rulers. I've
Mhm.
heard of people sinking those and being able to get them back up. Um, that's stuff that you can do. We got a really nice tip. I really like this one from Gordon, who said a good way to do it is to set your two decoys 22 inches apart. So now you know what those
Oh,
you know you've got 22 inches between those lines for your decoys, and you know that something that's coming in that's bigger than that, that's obviously bigger than that, is going to be a no go. So that was a really good tip from Gordon. And yeah, you can put
that's a great tip.
other things down there, but just whatever you put down there, take it out because you don't want to be leaving PVC in the bottom of lakes.
Yeah.
That's not the greatest. Is it possible to spear without the dark house, or is the dark house necessary to be able to see the fish in the hole?
So a dark house is necessary. You just can't see in the daylight unless you have that. It covers up the hole and gives it like a nice glow, and you can see really nicely in there. You don't have to have a house that's like a spear house. If you have like a little pop-up hub and you want to cut a hole in there, you can lay like yoga mats down or something of that nature and spear in there.
Nice. If you don't have a chainsaw, what are your suggestions on cutting holes?
That's a great question. So what I've seen, people do this a lot of different ways. What I've seen is people will take their auger and drill the corners of their hole out with their auger, and then they'll take what's called an ice saw, and it's like a blade. I don't know if do you have one with you, James?
I don't have one right here with me, but
Yeah.
the
Okay. It's
it
like a tooth blade that you saw the ice with, and you saw in between the auger holes and cut it out that way.
yep. Yeah, so that's what I use. I use a hand saw, and it folds out to about 48 inches. So it's a long blade. It looks like something out of Conan the Barbarian. And it's specifically designed for sawing through ice. Um, Once ice gets to be about 2 feet thick, that's some exercise right there. So we drill our four corners, and we'll drill two in the middle, and then we'll cut out two big blocks because it's a little easier that way. I know folks who just drill overlapping holes,
Yeah, you can do
and
that too.
they'll drill it out that way. So a dedicated chainsaw isn't necessarily required. It just makes it go quicker.
Yeah.
Let me see. Andy or Alec, I appreciate your question about any talks of Mille Lacs allow a northern over 30 inches to be harvested again. That's kind of beyond the scope of this talk. I hope so. That's all I can say. But that's that's a little far afield from our topic today.
Mhm.
Um, for Robert, any tips on portable spear houses, brands, style, etc.?
Oh.
Um, so I mean, you talked in your talk about you have a permanent one, and then you've got some portable ones, correct?
Yeah, so we had somebody cut a hole in the floor of our permanent house. Somebody just does that, and so we customized it a little bit. We've got an otter like pop-up house that works great. We really like it. And then we've made some like plywood flooring that we put down in that house too. And it allows for actually a pretty big hole. We cut a 4 foot by 4 foot hole in there, and then we lay the flooring down and then put the pop up over it.
Yeah.
But clam makes good ones. Otter, we've got an otter, but that doesn't mean other ones aren't good. Eskimo.
Yep. Um, Let me see. We're down to our last minute. I've got a couple of questions in the chat. I'm just trying to see really quick. What's the oddest thing you've seen swim or float through the hole?
Well, let me see. I've had a muskrat come up in my hole before. That was pretty weird. I screamed. I screamed bloody murder, I'm not gonna lie, it startled me. So that's probably the weirdest thing I've seen, but I've heard of other people seeing them before. But when you do see them, that's kind of your cue to move your house because if they know your house is there, they'll come in and like bring all sorts of I've seen this happen, weed and muck and like make it their like little warm winter getaway house, and you don't want that. So if the
Nice.
muskrats find you, you gotta move.
Nice. Well, we're at 1 o'clock. Amanda, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your knowledge. I really appreciate all the tips, all the tricks. Thank you for folks that are on. Um, Real quick, there's a Minnesota fish art contest open for kids. Please take a look at that at the Minnesota Conservation Magazine, the fish art contest. It's a great way to get kids involved in this, and who knows, their artwork could be featured in DNR materials moving forward. Um, Please be safe out there. Follow the rules. Um, Always remember, ice is never 100% safe. Be careful. Be careful. Be careful. Have a lot of fun. This, spearing is a tremendous activity. It really is a ton of fun. Just it, it's very meditative. You're just kind of sitting out there. You're zoned in on this giant aquarium that you're sitting on top of, and it's amazing to watch the panfish come through. It's amazing to see the big northerns come in, and it definitely gives you a rush. So give it a shot. Please make sure you pick up your trash. Don't leave the ice a mess. Leave it better than you found it is always a good rule to operate under. So uh, be well with policing yourself, and make sure you get your gear. So thank you so much. We'll be back next week, everybody, talking about squirrel hunting, and I really appreciate it. Amanda, we're gonna head back into the digital green room. Y'all be safe, enjoy
Sounds good.
yourselves, and
Feel free to connect with me if you have any more questions.
excellent. Thank you so much. All right, bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.